Welcome to the daily morning Srimad Bhagavatam class at Sri Radha Kalachandidam. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakaacharya Ashtotra Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Canto 3, chapter 12. Okay, please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrit. Let's do it together. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiret. No. Let's do the meaning. No, the previous one, right? The previous one. The previous one. That's why we do the meaning. Reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadev, the author. Now the next one. Nashta prayeshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. Meaning, please? Yeah. Service to the pure devotee. All that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. Okay, so it's nice to do the meaning because, okay, the songs, the prayers are nice, but when we know the meaning, it has a potency of its own. Okay. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. See the dark night of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch light of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Okay. And now we're continuing with our daily reading. We are on Canto 3, Chapter 12, titled Creation of the Kumaras and Others. We'll do text 1, 2 and 3. I saw that you switched me. First time I have 3 verses instead of 23. Yes. Thank you. So we'll read the translations for text 1, 2 and 3, and our text for focus today is text 2. So we'll come back, do the Sanskrit, and then we'll read Srila Prabhupada's purport and discuss a little bit. Wait for a couple of minutes till Drishtadyumna Prabhu brings up the verse. No, let's start from, let's read the translations for 1, 2, 3 and then we'll go to text 2. Please, can we start? Somebody wants
Text
to read.
1. Sri. Sri Maitreya.
Haribol.
Text 1. Sri Maitreya said, O learned Vidura, so far I have explained to you the glories of the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in its feature of Kala. Now you can hear from me about the creation of Brahma, the reservoir of all Vedic knowledge.
What is Kala? Time. We have this entire chapter, the previous chapter, that was going into great detail about time. Yeah, this is what we discussed yesterday. Now, now Lord Brahma is going to create. Okay, text 2.
Brahma first created the nescient engagements like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusionary bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity.
Nescience. Does anybody know what nescience means? Ignorance. Yeah. Okay, text 3, and then we'll come back to text 2.
Seeing such a misleading creation as a sinful task, Brahma did not feel much pleasure in his activity, and therefore he purified himself by meditation on the personality of Godhead. Then he began another term of creation.
Yeah. So there are two kinds of creations. This is the second kind of creation that we're going to see. This is called Visarga, or secondary creation. What was the primary creation that we saw in the beginning of third canto? Does anybody remember? Yeah, it's the creation of Mahavishnu, right? He then lies on the Garbha ocean. From his navel sprouts a lily flower, a lotus flower. Sprouts a lotus flower. And then on top of the lotus flower is Lord Brahma. And then when Lord Brahma was created, he had no clue where he was, right? And then he tried going down the stem of the lotus flower. He couldn't figure it out. And then he was performing great penance and austerities. And then he got the audience of Vishnu, and then he gave him all the knowledge for him to create the universe. And then Vidura and Maitreya, the conversation that's happening with these two people, Vidura has been asking Maitreya about creation. So the first kind of creation is where Mahavishnu has created all the building blocks of creation. Now Brahma's job is to put those elements together and then make something out of it. So we have these 24 elements that we saw that Mahavishnu created, and with those 24 elements now Brahma has to start his secondary creation, which is basically what he'll start doing from this chapter onwards. So let's go to text 2 and do the Sanskrit. Can you open the Sanskrit? Please repeat. Sasarjagrendataamishram. Sasarjagrendataamishram. Atatamishram adikrit. Mahamoham cha moham cha. Tamaschagnanavrittaya. Sasarjagrendataamishram. Atatamishramadikrit. Mahamoham cha moham cha. Tamaschagnanavrittaya. Sasarjagrendataamishram. Atatamishramadikrit. Mahamoham cha moham cha. Tamaschagnanavrittaya. Somebody want to chant? ससर्जाग्रेन्दतामिश्रम् अथ तामिश्रमाधिकृत् महामोहं च मोहं च तमश्चाज्ञानवृत्तय ससर्जाग्रेन्दतामिश्रम् अथ अत्थामिश्रमाधिकृत् महामोहं च मोहं च तमश्चाज्ञानवृत्तय ससर्जाग्रेन्दतामिश्रम् अथ तामिश्रमाधिकृत् महामोहं च मोहं च तमश्चाज्ञानवृत्तय. Mataji's? Yeah. Go ahead. Sasarjangrendataamishram atha tamishramadhikrit महामोहं च मोहं च तमश्चाज्ञानवृत्तय. Okay. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This is the word for word translation. Sasarja, created. Agre, at first. Andatamishram, the sense of death. Atha, then. Tamishram, anger upon frustration. Adikrit, all these. Mahamoham, ownership of enjoyable objects. Cha, also. Moham, illusory conception. Cha, also. Tamaha, darkness in self-knowledge. Cha, as well. Ajnana, nescience. Vrittaya, engagements. Translation. Brahma first created the nescient engagements like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity. Let's read the purport. Somebody wants to read the purport?
Before the factual creation of the living entities in different varieties of species, the conditions under which a living being in the material world has to live were created by Brahma. Unless a living entity forgets his real identity, it is impossible for him to live in the material conditions of life. Therefore, the first condition of material existence is forgetfulness of one's real identity. And by forgetting one's real identity, one is sure to be afraid of death, although a pure living soul is deathless and birthless. This false identification with material nature is a cause of false ownership of things which are offered by the arrangement of superior control. All material resources are offered to the living entity for his peaceful living and for the discharge of the duties of self-realization in conditioned soul, in conditioned life. By where is it? But due to false identification, the conditioned soul becomes entrapped by the sense of false ownership of the property of the Supreme Lord. It is evident from this verse that Brahma himself is a creation of the Supreme Lord, and the 5 kinds of nations which the which condition the living entities in material existence are creations of Brahma. It is simply ludicrous to think the living entity to be equal with the Supreme Being when one can understand that the conditioned souls are under the influence of Brahma's magic wand. Patanjali also accepts that there are 5 kinds of nescience as mentioned herein.
Yeah. Amazing purport. I like the last sentence. Prabhupada is simply ludicrous to think. So, Prabhupada starts off by saying, these are the conditions under which living being has to live in this material world. So, for anything that we do, we need to know 3 things. These 3 things are called Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana. Sambandha means what? Does anybody know what Sambandha means? Relationship. Relationship of what? Okay, is that all? What else? Matter and spirit. What else? In general, we've seen Krishna's energy to be 3, right? What are the 3 energies of Krishna that we've seen? Correct. Spiritual energy, which is Krishna's internal energy, material energy, which is Krishna's external energy, and marginal energy, which is Krishna's energy in the middle, that can either go this way or that way, right? Basic Sambandha means we know the relationship of all 3. What is the relationship of Krishna's internal potency with his external potency and marginal potency? Okay. What is the relationship of the marginal potency with Krishna's internal and external potency? And what is Krishna's external potency's relationship with its internal potency and marginal potency? This is Sambandha. Why is this very important? Why is the relationship very important to figure out before we do anything? Before the next 2 steps, the first step is said Sambandha. We need to know the relationship. Because what is the next step? What is Abhideya? The process, right? Without knowing the conditions in which you are set up, if you set up a process, is the process going to succeed? Right? Or are you going to achieve the prayojana or the goal? The basic, sorry, you were saying?
You could process, but you're not going to be as in depth. You know what I mean? Because you don't know why you're doing it. So you might do it because of...
You want to hold the mic, or else people online might not be able to hear.
I was thinking that you could start the process without knowing these things, but it's not going to be very deep. It's going to be more ritualistic.
Correct.
Right? So if you know these reason why I'm doing these processes,
Yes.
then it's deeper and goes more into the heart.
Yes, that's very true. And that is what is the condition of this material world, is the opposite of knowledge. Which is what? What is Brahma creating here? He's creating the nescient engagements. All of us in this world, in our default state, are in nescience, or the equivalent word for that is what? Ignorance. What are we ignorant of? We are ignorant of God, we are ignorant of us. What else are we ignorant about? The relationship between us and God. What else? Which is us, right? We are ignorant about who we are. Yeah, we are ignorant also about the place that we are in. We have no idea what this place is. We have no idea who we are. We have no idea what we need to do. And from that position, all of us are acting. And then we're thinking, from that position, any action that I do is going to give me great success. And I'm going to be so happy by doing the things that I'm going to do without knowing anything about the place that I am in, what I'm supposed to do, who I am, and what I am supposed to do. Right? This is what is the material condition. This is what Lord Brahma first creates. He has to do that because all of us want to be in that position. So before the creation happened, before the lotus came out of the navel of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, there was another description of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu's navel. Does anybody remember it? about the navel specifically, not the ocean. There was a specific description of the navel. It's like a lake. Then what does it give you a color? It was a blackish bluish color, it says. And what does Srimad Bhagavatam say that blackish bluish color is representing? No. Who is coming out of the navel? Brahma and all the living entities also. So, and Srimad Bhagavatam says it is the sinful tendencies of the living entities that makes that color blackish blue in Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, if you go back to chapter 8 or chapter 7. This is why the material world is created in the first place, is that we have forgotten what our real identity is. What is our real identity? Jiver Swarupahoy Krishnera Nityadas. We are eternal servants of Krishna. We are supposed to be subordinate to God. This is our actual eternal position. Yet, we really don't want to do it. I don't want to be subordinate to Krishna. I want to be the master. I want to be the master and proprietor of everything. And because of this tendency, Krishna has to create this material world. This is like a sandbox where Krishna says, okay, go and try it out. Try being the Lord and Master here and then see how things go for you. And for us to do that, we have to forget this actual identity that we have. And therefore, the first thing of these 5 things that Lord Brahma creates is we forget our identity. Tamaha, ignorance. The first thing is we start forgetting who we actually are. And this is not something that Brahma is creating on his own. Krishna has already created this particular aspect of nescience. You know what this aspect of nescience is from the 24 or 25 elements that Krishna has created? From which, this is secondary creation, right? Lord Brahma is not creating anything from the beginning. There are already building blocks that Krishna has already created from which he is using to create all these items, right? Which element is Brahma using here to create these 5 items of nescience? False ego. Yeah, this is the main element, right? The last layer of this material universe, right? We've seen this. The 8 elements are 10 times thicker than the previous element. I think that's the chapter before that is where we read that, I think. So you have those 8 elements, Bhumi, Rapo, Nalo, Vayu, Kham, Mano, Buddhi, Revacha, Ahankaram, Iti, Emme, Bhinna, Prakriti, Rashtrada. Krishna says these 8 elements are earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence and false ego. In that order, you have earth, and then water is 10 times thicker, the element water, and then fire, like that. So false ego is the thickest of all layers. It is because of that layer is why we are bound to this material world. And what is false ego? Ignorance. But what else? What else is the specific definition of false? Yeah, one thinks that we are the controller, but actually it's misidentification. Ego means our actual identity, right? False ego means it's not our identity. Our identity is false, right? Our actual identity is that of to be the servant of the Lord. When false identity comes into the picture, we think, I'm not the servant of the Lord, I am the master. And everybody in this world starts behaving from that position, right? And from that position, we say forgetfulness of one's real identity. This is the first element, tamaha, that Lord Brahma creates. Can you scroll up a little bit? So you have to read the Sanskrit from the back. So the last verse is tamaha. And then from tamaha, he creates moham. Moham is illusion. Once you forget what your actual identity is, you are put into illusion. And what is that illusion? Is ignorant? Which is not. Yeah, the actual definition of illusion is that which is not. And what is it that which is not? Is that we are the spirit souls, that is our actual identity. But the illusion that we are put in is that we think we are these bodies. That is the second kind of nescience that Lord Brahma starts creating. So all of us think, oh, I am a man, I am a woman, I am an Indian, I am an American, and then so many designations that we have on ourselves, and every single designation that when somebody asks us to introduce ourselves, every single thing that we say about ourselves is born based out of the body. It has nothing to do with our actual identity as the spirit soul, right? And when this illusion hits, what do we start to do? Any activity that we do, why do we do it? Yeah, everything that we do so that we want to be happy. Does anybody do any activity so that, oh, I really want to be miserable, let me go and hammer my finger with a hammer? Nobody does it, except for very few people who have issues, right? But most people in this world want to do things that make them happy. So therefore, because of our illusion, we think I am this body, therefore satisfying this body is going to give me happiness. Do we get happiness out of satisfying anything out of this body? No. And this illusion also is not just we are this body, we also think I am the master of everything that there is. This is what Krishna says in the Gita also. We've discussed it many times in our classes. After he describes about the 8 elements, material elements, he also says there is something beyond these material elements. Apareyam itastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhuta mahavaho yedam dharyate jagat. He says there is something beyond these material elements that I've created, Arjun, which is spirit soul, right? There is something beyond matter, which is who all of us are. And what is this spirit soul trying to do? It is trying to exploit the material elements. This is what we're all trying to do, right? Every single activity that we try to do in this world is so that we can exploit the material nature around us, so that we can be happy. It gives us the third sense of false ownership. We've seen, for those of us who have been following this third canto, we clearly see the scale in which creation is done, the things that are needed to create this material universe, and our part in the entire aspect. So far we have not even touched upon the material, the spirit soul's part in creation. This is the first living entity, Brahma, who is trying to create. Jai Shri Radha Kalachandji ki Jai. And yet, we think I am the owner of everything that's around me. I have the right to do anything and everything with everything around me. This is the kind of, the third kind of illusion that we get, which is even more deeper, right? The first sense is forgetting our identity. Because we forget our identity, we get put into illusion. And this illusion, we think I am not the spirit soul, I am the body. And because I am in that illusory sense, I start claiming false ownership to everything around me. And because of false ownership, I think that I control everything. Right? If I own something, it means I control that, isn't it? So we try to do things that will make us happy, but yet we always end up angry and frustrated. This is the fourth aspect that Lord Brahma creates, right? This is anger after frustration. This is, Krishna says this in the Gita, this beautiful sequence of how anything that we try to do ends up in anger and frustration. Does anybody know this cycle? It's a very scientific cycle. Yes, Drishyajimna Prabhu. Mike, please.
Is this in the second chapter?
Yes.
So, lust and then attachment.
Before lust is attachment. What is before attachment? What kicks off things? Contemplation on?
The objects of the senses.
Yes.
Attachment develops, and then from attachment comes lust, anger.
From lust comes anger, frustration, and frustration comes
bewilderment of memory.
anger. From anger comes bewilderment of memory.
Then they're illusioned.
And then you fall down. This is a very, very amazingly scientific description of how we get into anger that Krishna gives. Dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangas teshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kama krodho bijayate krodat bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibrama smriti brimshat buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. Krishna says. So because we think we are the bodies, right? What we start believing is the body means the senses, right? Satisfying my senses, we think will actually give us happiness. Seeing something nice, hearing something really nice, tasting something nice, touching something nice, smelling something nice, right? So what we start doing is we start contemplating. These are the objects of the senses. Your senses are eyes, ears, nose, mouth, skin. That's it, right? Yeah, 5. I've covered 5. And then the object of the senses are, for the eyes is to see, for the nose is to smell, for the ear is to hear, for the tongue is to taste, and for the skin is to touch, right? These are the objects of the senses. We start contemplating on how do I start satisfying my senses based on the object of the senses. What can I eat something that's really nice that will actually make me happy? What can I see something nice that will actually make me happy, right? But Krishna says, once we start contemplating on this, what happens? As we start contemplating on the desires, we start getting attached to it. So we'll give you this example of the iPhones, the new iPhones released a few days back, and they started taking pre-orders yesterday. And you've seen this. Next week you will see people lining up in front of Apple stores, having tents the night before so that they could get their hands on the brand new iPhone the first day when it's on the market, right? So for the last year, the whole year, when the previous iPhone released, Apple has been saying, hey, we're going to give you another iPhone, we're going to give you another iPhone, we're going to give you another iPhone, right? And then my contemplation starts going on the iPhone. I said, oh, it would be nice to have an iPhone. And then the advertisement pops up again. Oh, it'll be nice to have an iPhone. And then I start contemplating on this. Once I start seeing things again and again and again, this is basically how the world of advertisement works, right? They show you the same things again and again and again. At some point, you start getting attached to it. You go on I-75, you have a billboard of iPhone. You go on some other road, you have another billboard. So somehow the other day, you start contemplating on the iPhone, right? And then you start getting attached to the iPhone. The idea that you should own an iPhone. And then when your contemplation happens, after your attachment, it turns into lust. You know what lust is? What is lust? We all know what attachment is, right? I really need it. What is lust? Which will never be satisfied. Okay, what else is? Jai Shri Radha Kalachanji ki Jai. What else is lust? Excessive attachment, that's good one. What else? Yes. That's basically what it is. It's an incredible yearning where at that point you cannot live without it. You have to get it somehow or the other. That's the point of lust. It could be lust for anything. Lust for power, lust for material things, lust for position, anything. When attachment gets to the point of lust, it gets to a point where we just cannot live without it. I really need to have it. That's where it happens. But Krishna says, you had a question? Can you take the mic, please? Turn it on. Yeah.
I was going to say both lust and attachment are can be confused with love, but they're both not.
Correct. Exactly. The lust is the exact opposite of love. We'll come to it. We're going to come to that point. So lust switches to anger. Krishna says, why? When you have this desire that you really need to have the iPhone, right? Why will that turn into anger? Obvious reasons. Anybody? You don't get it, right? You've really contemplated on it. You really think, oh, I should really have it. I've imagined so many things that you're going to do with the iPhone, and then you don't get it. Therefore, you get angry. What else? It's temporary. How? Correct. There are two aspects to what you're saying, right? It's temporary and you want to get the new one. Basically, we've covered all three things that will make us unhappy. Yeah, that's the first aspect that you said, right? It's temporary, you want a new one, is because you're disappointed with it. You've been thinking so much about the iPhone, and then you finally get it. But it's not really up to your expectations. You've built it up so much that I'm going to do this and do that and do that with the iPhone. It's completely dissatisfying your expectations, right? Or the next iPhone comes out and you think, oh, that's better than what I have. I need more. I need the next iPhone, right? Okay. The third scenario is the most difficult of all, right? You really want it, you get it, and it completely satisfies you, and still Krishna says you'll be angry. Why? Because the iPhone is temporary. Either you will be separated from the iPhone or the iPhone will be separated from you. This is the problem, is that both our bodies and the iPhone are temporary in nature, and therefore it is going to cause us anger. And when we do things in anger, it's going to cause us frustration, and the frustration is going to cause us anger. And when we do things in anger, nothing goes right. Because we don't think right. When we are angry, our brain doesn't function properly. Our intelligence is completely lost. This is what Krishna says. And when the intelligence is lost, we are in illusion. This is our position that Brahma has created us, right? So this is the complete flow. And the last thing that Brahma creates is the sense of death. When we are completely attached to this body, it's very, very hard for us to give up this body. And therefore, we have this constant fear of dying. I don't want to lose it. Yes? The mic, please.
I was appreciating this loss of intelligence, because I was thinking about how when people get mad, when they apologize, they go, I don't know why I did that.
Correct.
I really love you and I did this thing and I shouldn't have done it. So you can see that, like, you just forget, like, the relationship that you have or that care you have for somebody, or these things. You just, boop, gone.
Yep.
And you say things you regret.
Yes.
Do things you regret.
This is what Krishna says in the verse, Buddhi nashat pranashyati. Krishna, Buddhi means intelligence. When there is anger, we completely lose intelligence. This is the point. So how do we recover from this? When you get to the point of lust, it's impossible for us to recover. At that point, you're so completely bought into this idea that you really need to have it, right? So the point to where we can disconnect from this cycle, right? When Krishna says, when it comes to the point of lust, there is no way back. You have to go through the cycle of anger, frustration, loss of intelligence, and then you fall into this whirlpool of complete ignorance. Where can you stop this in this cycle? Which is the point where you can stop this cycle from progressing? Yeah, contemplation. When you start contemplating, your intelligence is still there at that point. You still have your intelligence to help you, right? You say, oh, I really don't need this iPhone. I have a phone that works perfectly well, and I really don't need this iPhone at this point. Or when you're trying to eat something like a donut or something that you really like, oh, I've really had 3 donuts this week, I really don't want another donut. Your intelligence should kick in and then control your sense and say, you've had enough for this week, right? But when we get to the point of lust, intelligence is completely under the control of senses, and therefore it's really hard for us to extricate ourselves from that situation, right? So we were talking about lust. Esther was saying it's the exact opposite of love, right? This is our position, is that we said what our actual identity is, right? Our actual identity is that of spirit soul, and all of us have to be subservient to the Lord in a relationship. But when we hear the word servant, it's not a very palatable word, so to speak, in the world that we live in, right? How many of us wants, if you go out and take a mic in Dallas downtown and say, hey, do you want to be the master or do you want to be the servant? and how many of them on the road are going to say, no, I really want to be the servant? It's not a natural thing because of the experiences that we have had in this world, right? Whenever we have tried to surrender to masters in this world, what has happened? They exploit us, they fall short of taking care of us, fall short of our expectations. They completely exploit us. And therefore this fear is valid, that why should I surrender to somebody? Why should I become the servant of somebody? But the person that we are surrendering to is somebody who is completely the opposite of everybody here in this world. All of us in this world are trying to satisfy ourselves somehow or the other by exploiting others. That is our very nature, right? Of all of us in this material world. But Krishna, like we have seen in all the descriptions in this canto, does he really need anything from us? What use is there for him from us that he needs to use us to exploit us to get something from us? This is not what Krishna is looking for, right? Therefore, being servants really means this relationship that we have with Krishna in love. The closest example that we can see in this material world is that of a mother serving the child. It's a very thankless job. Unless there is really love in that relationship, you really cannot do the things that a mother does, especially to a newborn child. It's a very, very hard act to follow. A mother serving her child, expecting nothing in return, right? This is the kind of relationship that all of us have with the Supreme Lord. And that is born out of love because it is completely without any expectations. This is how a devotee thinks about Krishna, and this is how Krishna thinks about the devotee also, because in a relationship it's two-way, right? It's not just one way. The relationship that we have in this world is exploitative because it's mostly one way. We're trying to give to the other person, and the other person is trying to take it, not give anything in return. Or even if they give anything in return, it doesn't meet our expectations. And yet, our actual identity is that we are spirit souls, we have a relationship with the Lord in love, which is the exact opposite of lust. And what is the difference? Is that lust is not completely, what do you say? Why am I blanking out? It is not for your own satisfaction. It is completely selfless. That is love, right? Whereas lust means to satisfy our own desires, for our own endeavors. Why am I doing this? So that I can be happy. Right? That is lust. Whereas love means, how can Krishna be happy? And Krishna thinks the same. How can my devotee be happy? Right? He is ready to be the chariot driver of his devotee. When Krishna sees his friend Sudama, what does Krishna do? The equations according to our material world are the exact opposite. This Sudama and Krishna were studying in the same school, and they're meeting after probably so many years, decades they're meeting. And Sudama's position in the society is that he is really, really poor. And he doesn't even have his next meal. That's how poor he is. He doesn't have proper clothes to wear. And at the same time, Krishna is in Dwaraka. He has 16,108 palaces. And then he's really living a really royal life. Right? This is the position of power that we have and see in this material world. And usually, the person at the top starts exploiting the person at the bottom and doesn't really respect the person at the bottom, right? And yet, when Sudama comes to visit Krishna in his palace, the guards in his palace basically say, "Oh, you're not allowed in this palace because he's wearing torn clothes. He's not really looking like a person who could enter into a royal palace, right?" And yet, Krishna sees him from the balcony. And what does Krishna do? He remembers his friend and comes running down, hugs Sudama, takes him all the way to his palace, and doesn't stop with that. He bathes Sudama's feet and takes the water from Sudama's feet. This is the person that we are surrendering to. This is the person that we have a relationship with, that we have forgotten this relationship that we have with Krishna. All of us have this relationship. We can see all these wonderful paintings around us in this temple. We have conjugal relationships, we have friendly relationships, we have paternal relationships, we have relationships of servant with the Lord. All of us have these relationships. These are broad categories, but all of us have one unique relationship that we have with the Lord that we've all forgotten. We've forgotten. And it is forgotten because Lord Brahma has created all these 5 nascent elements. Right? The entire process of devotional service of bhakti is to just wake up from our slumber, wake up from our ignorance, and to realize our actual relationship with the Lord. That's all it is. Everything that we're doing is so that we can remember our actual position, our actual identity, and then serve Krishna from that position. And only from that position, when we serve, are we actually going to attain happiness that all of us are yearning for. We know from all our experiences in this world, we try to be happy, and it always ends up in misery because of the cycle that Krishna tells. It is going to end up in anger and frustration, one day or the other. This is the problem with the setting, right? So therefore, coming back to the first point, we need to know the settings that we are in, the sambandha. It is very important. And therefore, then we can set up processes according to the place that we are in, which is abhideya, to actually achieve our goal. Then the process is very rapid. I want to finish off by telling this story of why this knowledge is very important, right? Prabhupada tells this story. This is my favorite story. One of my favorite stories that Prabhupada says is of a veterinary doctor. You've heard this? You've heard the story of a veterinary doctor? Deepak Prabhupada has heard it so many times, I think. So, you have this very famous veterinary doctor. Veterinary doctor are doctors who treat animals, right? So, he has an apprentice with him. And then, this is a very famous veterinary doctor, and therefore there is one peculiar case in the city that this doctor is called for. There is this horse that's not able to breathe, and the throat is swollen. It's so big, the throat. So this doctor takes his apprentice and then goes to that horse and feels the neck, and then asks the owner of the horse to bring a hammer. Then he whacks the throat of the horse with a hammer and says, in 2 to 3 days the horse should be okay. Okay, and then he goes. And then the apprentice sees this. Oh, being a veterinary doctor is so easy. All I need to do is feel the neck of the animal and whack the neck of the animal with a hammer, and the animal will get cured in 2 to 3 days, right? And then he says, now I'm going to start my own practice. I'm done with being the apprentice of this doctor. And then starts his own practice. And then because this veterinary doctor is a famous doctor and he's a student, everybody starts calling him also. When the doctor is busy and they need some help, they call this apprentice. And then what does his apprentice do? He says, can you please give me a hammer? And hammers the throat of the animal. And what happens when you hammer the throat of the animal? It dies. It's in terrible pain and the animal dies. And then everybody starts getting really upset about this. And then goes to this doctor and says, what is your student doing? Why is he hammering animals in the throat? And then this doctor is like, he has no idea why he is doing this, because he hasn't taught the apprentice to do this. And then he goes and speaks to the apprentice and says, why are you doing this? And he says, oh, you did this the other day. I saw you doing it. You hit the throat of the horse with a hammer, and the horse was cured in the next 2 to 3 days. But that's what I've been doing, and people are getting mad at me. And then the doctor tells him, you foolish fellow, that was a 1 in a million case. What had happened was the horse had actually swallowed a watermelon, and the watermelon was stuck in the throat, and what I was trying to do was break the watermelon in its throat so that it would go inside and it would start breathing. That was a once in a lifetime thing that you would ever do to an animal, and you think that's what you have to do every single time. This is what happens when you don't have knowledge or half-baked knowledge, is that one, it can become very ritualistic, right? Either you're doing because, oh, people have been doing this forever, therefore I'm doing it. There's the story of a cat that in a marriage, you know this? So cat is considered very inauspicious. So you don't bring a cat in the home or in the temple or any nice place. You really don't bring a cat, right? So when you have a marriage ceremony, it's considered very inauspicious according to the Vedic customs. So therefore, the mother-in-law sees a cat in the marriage hall, and people will think it's inauspicious, so they might cancel the marriage. So therefore what she says is, put a basket over the cat so that nobody sees it, right? And then the daughter-in-law has no idea why she is doing it. Therefore, after the mother-in-law has passed, there is a marriage ceremony that's happening, but there is no cat around. So what she asks is, bring a cat, and she puts a basket on top of the cat, so that this is what her mother-in-law did. This becomes ritualistic, right? When you don't have knowledge, in the least, it becomes a very ritualistic thing. I have no idea why I'm doing it, but I'll keep doing it as a matter of ritual. Or it will become very harmful to others, like the apprentice, when he starts hammering all the animals in the throat and the animal dies. This is very problematic. Therefore, knowledge is very important, but it is not sufficient. It is not just sufficient, right? Just because you have knowledge, does it mean everything will work out perfectly? Cigarette smoking is injurious to health. How many of you have seen this in boxes of cigarettes, right? And yet people smoke all the time, right? So knowledge in itself is not a sufficient category, but it's a very important thing in our world, so that we can start doing things. When we start applying that knowledge is when we see magic happening, right? This is called Vijnana. Jnana means knowledge, Vijnana means realized knowledge. When we start applying that knowledge, we start getting realizations of various things. And from that point, our faith is really strong, right? And then we can be fixed in our positions and then practice devotional service very nicely. So Sambandha, Abhideya and Prayojana, right? So this is Brahma's creation, and yet he was very unhappy about it, and we'll see what else he creates. Because he knows it's a thankless job, Prabhupada says in the next purport. third purport we saw, after Brahma creating all of this, he knew this was not good for the living entities, right? Yet we have this desire to enjoy separate from Krishna, therefore Brahma has to create this, so that we can try out various things. We see this last thing, when this illusion is shattered, what happens? When Arjuna and Krishna are in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, they are really, really close friends. And what Arjuna asks is something that he should not have asked Krishna. He says, can you show me the universal form? When Arjuna sees this, he's terrified of Krishna. He's bowing from all directions. He said, oh Krishna, I'm so sorry I've behaved with you like this. I've basically pulled your leg. I've said so many things that I should not have said about you. Because this is Krishna, right? From him everything is emanating. The universal form. His mouth is swallowing all these people, and the heads are crushed between his teeth, and he's seeing horrible things in the universal form. It shatters his complete illusion about Krishna. So So anyway, this is what I was going to give as an example, right? So yeah, basically I want to stop here and see if there are any questions or comments that you have about the things that we have to create. Therefore, Brahma has to create this so that we are in this illusion. We don't really recognize for Krishna for who he actually is, so that we can start enjoying in this material world. Yes? Mike, please.
Prayojana, can you give the simple definition?
The simple definition of prayojana is to realize our actual identity. This is our goal. The entire process of devotional service is so that we can realize who we actually are. Yes, Mataji. Wait for the mic, please.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So actually, I mean, this is just my realization. So if we see the five essences that Brahma created, we can see that because we did not have the prayojana, we did not understand that clearly, like this is my identity. We didn't identify ourselves. I mean, we don't know our identity. Because of that, the abhideya is getting like it's not proper. Like we are put into illusion, and then we think we are the master, and we try to own everything. And because of that, our relationship with the Lord gets. I mean, we are not able to realize that. So I felt like maybe it's the. I mean, at least for the material world, it's the other way around. The prayojana is not correctly defined. So because of that, the abhideya is really messed up, and because of that, our sambandha is like destroyed. We are not able to understand the relationship with God.
Yeah, it's kind of a cyclical thing. The prayojana is not correctly defined because we don't know who we are. You see, that's where the problem comes from. Why are we not able to define the prayojana properly? What is stopping us? It's because we don't know what our actual identity is. I don't know who I am, therefore I don't know what my actual goal is, therefore I define the wrong goal. Right? That is why the prayojana is wrong. Right?
First time I'm hearing that it is a cycle. I always thought it's like a straight line. Okay, sambandha, abhidaya, prayojana. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, because the prayojana sambandha is wrong, then therefore your process is wrong, therefore your goal is wrong, and that in turn propels your identity to be even more wronger. Right? This is what Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Devotion, is that everything in this world starts from avidya. We have seen this, ignorance, right? Therefore, because we are in ignorance, we have this tendency to commit sinful activities. Sinful activities means things that we try to do to satisfy ourselves, right? And when we start having these tendencies, we act on these tendencies, right? And then these tendencies start creating seeds or reactions that we will have to experience in the future. And these seeds at some point get fructified, right? When we start experiencing these, we get this tendency again to create sinful activities. So this cycle is called Kuta, Bija, Aprarabdha and Prarabdha. And this cycle keeps continuing. It's always a cycle. That's why it's very vicious, this material world. When we are in this material world and we start acting in a certain way, it's a very hard course to correct. That is why when we have this access to bhakti, right, it's a very rare thing in this world. Very, very rare thing in this world. Because it's a very hard course correct for most people in this world. By somehow or the other, we have come into the contact of devotional service by the mercy of Krishna or devotees, and we should really value it. Yeah. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Prabhu, I was just thinking of let's say an analogy on this, like say a ship wrecks on an island, and say a ship wrecks on an island, and there are some people left there who procreates there. Their kids will never know that where are we in this world today, even in 2023. I mean, without knowing what's going on, and they'll think that's all what they've got.
Yeah.
And I guess our situation is exactly like that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, because we think all that we see around is all that it is, without knowing what's all around. So just
Yeah.
that.
See, this is the thing. Prabhupada says in this next verse, he quotes this famous verse from the Gita. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha. Vedaischa sarve rahameva vedyo vedanta kritveda videva chaham. But his focus is the first two. Krishna says, from me comes knowledge, remembrance and forgetfulness. Right? So the analogy of the island is valid, but it's not completely valid, because in the world that we live in, Krishna has created this material world. If we really want to know, we can actually know. Right? It's not that Krishna is personally present within all of us and he will enlighten us. And if we really see the world, we can see there is order in this world, there is definitely some creation behind this world. If we want to see things, Krishna will make us remember. But he'll also help us forget him. Right? Because we want to enjoy separate from Krishna, Krishna will give us this forgetfulness of him also. But Krishna is present in this world, whereas on an island, in the analogy, the external factor might not be present to give us the knowledge, right? But if we want to know, we really can know in this world. Right? When Brahma wanted to know, he could know.
So basically, we're saying even in that case, eventually people will evolve to a stage where they'll realize there's some Sambandha and Prayojana.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Stop? Yeah, we should stop here. Vancha kalpatrubhyasya kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Awesome class. It's so funny. So I had it in my mind, and then this class was fully like solidified.